Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Agile Network India's January events. And we are now moving forward to our Bengaluru chapter panel discussion about evolving global capability centers and becoming strategic business enablers. And we are really glad to have amazing panelists in this discussion. We have Ganesh V. Iyer, we have Gopalan and Debabrata Sahu, and we also have Raj Shekhar, who is going to moderate the panel discussion. And before we move on to the discussion, I would like to thank our founding sponsors, Innovation Roots, which is a leading consulting and training organization and helping companies to achieve business agility and beyond. And I would also like to thank Agile for sponsoring Agile Network India, which is a Tata consultancy product, and it is completely a cloud-based solution for Agile project management and planning, and has DevOps capabilities. And without any further delay, I will pass on the microphone to Raj, Ganesh, Gopal, and Deba. Please join us on the webcam and microphone and introduce yourselves to us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Raj Shekhar Chinnaswamy, and I'll be the panelist and moderating the panelist and the panel today. Right. Let me share my screen, and we will introduce the panel. How do I share screen? Yeah. I hope you can see my screen. So we have 3 panelists today, and I'm going to moderate this session. About me, I am Raj Shekhar Chinnaswamy. I am currently a principal at Sabre Corporation. Over the last 2 decades, I've worked across multiple roles. In my current role, I am responsible for enabling high performance with the teams that I work at Sabre. Our next panelist is Ganesh Iyer. Ganesh is a product leader with a track record for having built, deployed, and operated distributed systems at scale in large enterprises. He has been leading organizations in their digital journey and building a culture of software excellence delivered through agile platforms, APIs, and microservices. Ganesh also has an entrepreneurial experience in building tech and SaaS platforms. Welcome, Ganesh.
Thank you, Raj.
Our next panelist is Gopal. Gopal has close to 25 years of experience in IT industry, covering areas of development, testing, quality, training, marketing. He has spearheaded several large-scale transformations and actively contributed back to the IT community via participation through several communities. Thank you, Gopal, for being part of ENI and this panel discussion. Our last panelist is Debabrata Sahu. Deb, as we prefer to call him, is an experienced program manager with over 20 years of delivery experience in IT industry, managing large-scale development and maintenance projects across the globe. Deb has been working with IBM for close to 20 years across a wide range of roles, from technical delivery, competency development, project and program management as well. He has proven skills in identifying and implementing best practices for maximizing productivity and achieving excellence in service delivery. Welcome, Dave, to the panel.
Thank you, Raj.
So, before I start, let me put some outline as to what these global capability centers are, so that our audience also understands the context in which we are talking about today, right? Global in-house centers or global capability centers, shortly, I think the short form that we've seen being used in industry is GICs, global in-house centers, or GCCs, global capability centers. This landscape has evolved significantly in the last 20 years, right? Originally, these were called captive centers in the early 90s. GICs typically are offshore centers that perform designated functions for large organizations. As of 2017, a NASSCOM report says there are close to 1,100 GICs in India, employing close to 8 lakh people, right? And generating approximately $23 billion of revenue in India. The global in-house centers are kind of redefining the way businesses leverage diverse talent across various geographies. GICs were initially set up with an objective of accessing talent pools, but over the years, GICs have evolved and are providing multiple value-added benefits. Right, we are seeing global in-house centers transition from being just cost drivers, just for cost advantage and low-cost resources, to strategic business enablers and value creators and even innovation centers. Right. And then in 2020, we had COVID and the world getting into a lockdown and everybody kind of working from home. And it has been a great leveler, right? With everybody working remote, it has provided our global in-house centers an opportunity to accelerate their transition to become strategic business enablers and innovation centers. Today, we will talk to our panel and try to understand and take some insights about what it takes for these global centers to rethink, to reposition themselves, and as strategic business enablers and value creators. Right. So that's what our panel discussion is about. I hope this gives you enough context for the set of questions and the insights to follow. So let me first start by asking our panel members about some capabilities or some essential capabilities that need to be developed in the global in-house centers to really become strategic business enablers. What kind of capabilities do these in-house centers need to develop? And again, this is open for all three panelists, but Dave, if you want to go first,
Yep.
feel free.
Yeah, thank you, Raj. As Raj was talking about, right now, COVID has given a great opportunity for all the GICs from moving from a cost center to innovation center, and they need to build certain capability, right? So when I think of the kind of capability they should be looking at, there are three primary areas I look at. The start with definitely the domain knowledge or the business knowledge. They should start building at. Uh, Currently, we see that is one of the area of challenge for the GIC where we don't have a deeper understanding of business. So that should be one of the capability where they can look at the data they have today in their system, then that can be converted to insight, and then those insight can be converted to different actions there. That's the number one. The second capability I can see is the leadership quality. What I mean by the quality of leadership is the GIC, when we working together, we have a set of SLA mindset, right? We given a scope of work and the timeline given to us, we are delivering uh, with quality right now. But I think as a leader, we have to see how we can move that mindset to some sort of business development mindset or entrepreneurship mindset that we need in terms of the leadership quality. And we are definitely seeing now a lot of changes happening, a lot of global role kind of moving to the global center now. We have seen in our organization itself the CEO kind of role moving back to offshore or to different GIC center, and that's basically helping us to breaking the bottleneck what we have will work with the cross country. And last, I think we should look at still on the automation point of view, right? The cost and productivity is still going to be focused. So we need to see how we can bring more automation on table, which can be enabled by sort of tools and technology available today. So that's what, Raj, I feel the three capabilities you should look at, the GIC should start developing.
Great. Ganesh and Gopal, would you like to add anything to this?
I'll allow Ganesh to speak first.
Thanks. I think it's a very pertinent question in the terms that when we look at the history of how these centers have evolved and remained competitive, and it's important to understand that any organization, whether the mothership or the GCC or the GIC, there are we need to plan for performing in different zones. The global centers have always been good at being in one part of an organization, which is the performance zone, right, where you are optimized for performance. But every organization has an innovation zone and a, uh, product innovation zone or process innovation zone. I think enabling GCC leaderships and mindsets to engage with these kind of different capabilities that exist within an organization is important. And through the idea of product leadership and design thinking and the technology expertise that we have, I think engaging in the different zones of an organization is very important. I think that's the way I would look at as we grow to become strategic business partners.
I'll just add on to what the other people have said, which are all extremely important. Um, One is, I think, um there has been a maturity curve where we started as basically design centers where we were asked to do basically coding and some testing and delivery, and then do a lot of defect fixing. And over the last 20 years or so, I think one of the biggest areas where India has contributed is um, our own people have filed a lot of innovative ideas. They have written some excellent white papers. They have challenged the world in terms of some presentable ideas where the papers have got converted into large scale IPRs, and some small product developments have also happened offshoot of that. So in addition to all this, I think the solution knowledge of what our people used to earlier just be development, that portion was missing. So I think the India centers now understand where their product or component is sitting in the whole solution, and then also build capabilities to do solution level testing, which was very, very important in a large scale development. On top of all this, I think one of the biggest gaps that most companies used to have was to build product management teams in India. And I think over the last 5, 6 years, you will see that local product management teams have been developed. They work with global product managers to answer queries to how products should actually function, how um, India-centric, customer-centric use cases can be developed, and you do local demos with the sales teams, and also do sales calls with the local sales team and present them to customers inside of India. So I think these have been some actions that companies have taken over the last 5 to 6 years, which has really repositioned India as a much more capability-oriented country in terms of end-to-end solutions, and positioning themselves as a global in-house center and also a strategic business center.
Sorry, I was figuring out the mute unmute button. So we talked about all the capabilities that are required. Dave, you mentioned about the mindset part of things, right? Traditionally, the mindset has been kind of an SLA driven or a service oriented mindset. Uh, if the panel can probably throw some light on how the mindset has evolved and what have they done as leaders to enable the shift of this mindset towards a product or a solution ownership mindset. uh, Question is open for everybody, please pitch in.
All right. Okay. All right. I think the key is to have one leader who's able to make this generation gap happen, where India can actually be positioned to take on global roles that are there. And unless you don't have such a leader who can start building this capability inside, it's extremely difficult. And I think the large scale multinational centers in India have started to keep some key leaders who are able to bridge the gap between the head office as well as the local centers that are there. And also the to think of end-to-end ownership, uh, it is important that sometimes a large amount of component development, not just one part, the all the component development happens inside of India, and I think teams have been able to push that very largely and get that portion of the work back to India here, because that is what positions them strategically to say that the end-to-end development can actually be done. And again, as I said, getting product management teams here. So I think this is the key, which is basically brought about that mindset shift.
Yeah, just to add to Gopal, right? We have seen maybe last 9 to 10 months now working remotely, and basically you are meeting virtually, right? And which kind of given a interesting twist there, right? When you work with your mother company and working here in the GIC. Though collaboration has gone better, I feel the kind of experience we are seeing, you are more collaborative, the knowledge sharing, the skill, cross skilling between the mother company and GIC has gone up in that. So that also help in terms of gaining those end-to-end knowledge in a particular product to be developed. And that's for a product mindset, I think that is very important, have those knowledge here within the GIC. That's just want to add to Gopal.
Also, I think the number of patents and white papers that have been filed from India, and some very innovative features that we have been able to put onto the product roadmap, has probably thought that the management teams outside of India, they do feel that the domain knowledge has increased here. I mean, and people coming with the right engineering mindset have the capability to execute large scale projects or products.
Yeah. So if I mean, very interesting points, and just if I could add on, I think in the last few years, I have been lucky enough to be part of teams, the GCC/GIC teams, where global products have been rolled out from the GICs or the GCCs, and I think the real shift that has been happening is from saying, hey, there is there is this mothership, and there's these ships that are to a mindset where it's about distributed teams that are working across the globe, uh, to to leverage what they are good at, and not necessarily predetermined about why you should be working with a particular team. So that just as computing has gone distributed, I think the teams and the way product development, I think, has gone distributed. So I've seen that mind shift change that's happening and has happened. Some great products coming out of India for global markets.
One other
Um,
shift, one other thing I want to just tell, from an example of the telecom standpoint, which I saw, especially working first for Lucent, then Lucent became Alcatel Lucent, and Alcatel Lucent became Nokia. I don't know how 2G and some bit of post 2G activity happened, but I can tell you, initially what happens in a new technology is, if let's take CDMA. If CDMA is a new technology, um, about 2 years or so of the technology work, uh, sometimes very minimal work comes to India, because they want to make sure that that domain knowledge gets started here. And those 2 years, the work happens somewhere else close to the headquarters. But The moment that first release happens, and or maybe a 1.5 release happens, from then on, you can say that that entire work starts to come over to India. So I can really tell you 3G, CDMA, 4G, and even 5G now. I know that the entire work is actually being done out of India.
You folks talked about mindsets with respect to GICs here locally, people in GICs and how they are evolving. But often we see this perception in the mothership that uh, our global capability center is predominantly a low-cost delivery house, right? What have you seen and how have you worked with leadership and folks working in these motherships to really change that perception that they have?
From
So,
my
sorry, go ahead,
Go
Gopal.
ahead. No, I just want to say, I think I answered it in the previous sentence when I actually said that building large scale products of 2G, 3G, and 4G and 5G, these are not small products at all. If I can sometimes explain, the kind of labs that you require to test all that, the only thing that was missing in India was the large scale testing of labs, the end to end solution of labs. Except for that, I think everything was actually developed in India. So this itself, I think, is a viewpoint that we can take, that uh, domain knowledge was started here, training and retraining was started here. We started something like um, uh, making sure that there are point of contacts for training, where when new people join in, what they actually have to go through, how they can go up the value chain in terms of uh, delivering first at a component level and an integrated level, and then at a solution level. And later on, I think we even started to position support centers out of India. So in very large product houses, you have level one product support, level two product support, level three product support, and level four product support comes to the R&D team. So level two and level three we kept in India, so that any field related issue will actually serve as a big lesson learning to the R&D team, rather than to say, hey, we fix defects in the field. That's the way to promote a innovative mindset thinking.
Yeah, so very interesting points. I think, in my experience, I think there's always that need with which a particular center, especially a GIC, has been established, right? And there's no point in kind of fighting that. As leadership, I think one of the things that I have been very cognizant is, how do you start involving yourself with the larger businesses in actually showcasing innovation, and then showing them that innovation can be scaled. I think both those engagements become very important for GICs to start showing that they have a lot more than what it was envisaged to be in the first place, right? So I think there are a lot of these debates that we have gone through, saying, should we move completely out of this, efficiency related stuff for which it was established, and the arm's length relationship, etc. I think it's a combination of being able to play in all these zones, but more and more pushing innovation. For example, some of the GCCs that I was involved with, we were the first to drive the agile mindset within the organization. It started with tech, but then we were able to get business teams think and work agile. Then came DevOps. We kind of started pushing for that. So there's domain related thing. There are process related stuff. There is technology related stuff. So we can pick and choose the entry mechanisms, to say, but build some innovations and then work with the larger teams to show it can be scaled. And it is relevant for the business problems that we are trying to solve, or the mothership is trying to solve, which is very important.
Great. So, Ganesh, you talked about taking that initiative to actually highlight what we can do, and taking on that additional responsibility. But often we realize that teams in India, or the teams in these GICs, typically miss out on the understanding the end-to-end customer journey. What is the our end customer going through, right? Um, are there any examples from any of your personal experiences where you've actually helped teams understand the customer journey and get to know the customer a lot more better?
Yeah, I mean, a brilliant question, and I think it is very important that this happens. So, in one of the GCCs that I work for, not only the teams, I know I personally used to spend 2 weeks in a year in call centers and 2 weeks in a year in the stores, just taking calls and understanding customers as they walk in, watching them, helping them out. I used to even I've gone on delivery vans to do delivery of products, so that we understand what is it. So I think it is very important. Such interventions can always be designed. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, mandatorily. And taking calls was not so easy when you were listening to those end calls from customers, right? So this gives you a very first-hand experience of what you have designed the system for, and where the customers are experiencing what they want or what they didn't want. So I think there are many such interventions. But in today's age, that data can be gathered through applications themselves, provided you have kind of have the right kind of application monitoring in places. You can figure out, and using analytics, you can actually reconstruct the customer journey and play it around with feedback, etc. So I think there are different ways and means, but I think engineering leaders should spend time in customer facing functions and operations functions, so that you understand. In one case, actually, we flipped the person running the warehouse and the person running the call center. We asked the warehouse person to head the call center and the call center person to head the warehouse. So there are many mechanisms to do that, but it's very important as we move towards that and establish that comfort with the mothership.
Great.
Yeah.
One of the Go
Sorry.
ahead, Deb.
Sorry. Look at the service organization point of view, right? I can talk about where we are doing something there. And this seems to be a common problem across the board in terms of missing out something because we are sitting somewhere else, or you are not really part of this original design team or something like that. So what we do in basically the garage methods that we are using now, and this has been very proven and successful, what we have seen, where we co-create, basically co-execute and cooperate, right? We kind of whether your mother company, your GIC, and the end client sitting together, you've gone through your requirement, they have a proper understanding, that you go through the design session and then start building your product or services what you are giving. So that kind of help in avoiding such kind of miss, or not understanding the customer journey end to end. So that is something we are doing.
Just to add to what was being said, is the role switching, where when we were part of the development, we were also being sent to the customer site to install the product and integrate the product along with the network. And when you are in development, you are probably doing a small component, but when you're sent to install it at the customer site, you kind of know what exactly is happening at the customer site. That's point number one. Point number two, um, there were also exchange of roles where people from development and testing were asked to be in level 2 and level 3 support. And when you look at the kind of queries that come in every day, answering those gave some kind of a feedback saying how our process activities in development and testing need to be changed, keeping in view of what we think differently and how a guy who's using our system is thinking differently.
I think this gives a perfect segue into trying to understand, um, there is an initiative teams in GICs are taking initiatives. They want to meet the customers. They want to learn about the customers, participate in actual product launches as well as product installations at various customer sites. But then sometimes we do hear rationals in the mothership saying a certain role or a certain function is best suited in a certain geography or best suited in the mothership itself, right? What arguments have you used, and what has been your experience in trying to persuade those functions or roles to be based out of the global capability center or the in-house center in India?
The biggest role that at least I have seen is product management. When R&D centers in India, which work on a different time zones from the real product management that sits in the US or so, um, is queries, answering queries, and with a 12-hour time difference, you cannot keep asking queries from 10 different people to one product manager, and that guy gets up the next morning and answers all the questions, and then these guys don't understand, and then there's a ping pong effect between the developer and the product management. So I think building local product management presence in where the development and testing happen was probably one of the biggest difference it made, to make sure that there's no lag or time lost to answering R&D questions related to development and testing.
Ganesh
Other
and Dave,
role
do
I
you
can
have anything else?
just other role I can feel is the front end cell, right? Where normally they feel this can be done only from the mother company side, right? We cannot do remotely and this, but that's something drastically changed with the digital disruption we have seen. We are having so many digital channel now to go through this front ending cell, and it's really working well. So I think the kind of perception we have seen that earlier, it's being changing now.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, this is a journey, and and this journey needs conversations at multiple levels. What I mean by multiple levels is, not all GICs, GCCs are modeled similarly, right? We tend to broad brush them as they're modeled differently in the context of the organization and the business industry that they operate in. So I think uh, the conversation needs to happen at capability levels, at leadership levels, at business model levels, and at thought leadership levels. And once you get those things in sync, then I think the model starts changing. But it's a journey. It needs a patient conversation, because see, all these have been brought together to work seamlessly for a particular process that was thought through. Just moving one way ahead of the other just creates a lot more disruptive energy than it producing the output. So I think it is very important. I'll give you a small example. A lot of the engineers in the GCC center today wants to do AI ML because that's the right thing to do, right? But is the business ready for it? Does the business process need it, right? How do you internally sell that? So one of the things we said, most of us, at least engineers, are not good salespeople. We think selling internally is not something, but we all have to sell our ideas. We all have to become good storytellers, right? We said let's develop those skills. Let's So I think you need to work at different levels, in as if it's a symphony or an orchestrate that in a way that change happens, and you have to be patient about it. It doesn't happen overnight.
To put it in a different perspective, it's like saying till the minimum viable product becomes something that is expansionable, probably the front end centers keep that in with them. And once that is proven that, hey, this is going to become a large scalable product, then all the dirty code is given to India and beautify this code. Is generally that's how it happens, I guess.
And we are good at that, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, we definitely are good at unraveling spaghetti code. But yes, there were a couple of things that were talked about that I heard Ganesh mention, Dave mention. elements of leadership, elements of design thinking. So that brings me to the question around HR, right? How can HR support uh, the GCCs in really evolving and becoming mature and becoming really strategic business enablers? So, what does HR need to do? And I also heard HR teams calling themselves people teams now. So, what do teams need to do to enable a global capability center?
I think maybe I can go first. HR is going to play a very big role here, right? Because you are looking at different kind of skill set to be built, and so we should have a right kind of strategy. They have to put it in terms of how to source different kind of talent we need, and that's number one. That's what they are doing. But second thing, they need to ensure how to create an environment where you can be more innovative. So one thing I feel, at least in the service organization, what we are working on, we see that sometimes we misunderstood this entire talent issues, right? So we just go and keep hiring people. We have something like, I need this skill and go and hire from the market. But we really has to understand what exactly looking at. You have to look at not only the skill, also in terms of the attitude part of it, right? How to develop. We are all talking about mindset, and that is very important when HR is going to look at hiring people and building those kind of skill set into this organization.
Ganesh and
This is
Gopal.
good. I have a completely different answer on this. I think the local HRs in some product companies really don't have the freedom to do what in realistic world that they would like to do. It all depends on what the technical product leader wants to make this happen. So I think it's all driven that way.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with Gopal. I think if the question is what should HR do, so in my opinion, three, four things. One, HR should start understanding the business and the relationship between the different centers, right? I think it's very important. That mindset that HR comes with saying, "Hey, I'm here to hire and manage people," has to change from saying, "I am a business enabler," right? A couple of the GCCs that I have worked with, uh, actually things changed when HR got a seat at the highest tables, because they are able to bring that kind of a thought process. While it is true that they might not be enabled, the challenge is how do they get enabled. It's as much as a challenge for the local HR functions, as much as expecting it to be given on a platter, so to say. I think that's one. Second one is, they have to understand business as much as anybody else. Right? Just going and hiring and saying I have a recruiter for front end technologies, back end technologies, and give me a JD and executing tasks. You will be treated that way. It's just the choices that you are making in your life that end up there, right? And the third one is, how do you build a culture? I might sound a little pessimistic. I've seen local HRs in larger forums saying, "Hey, you need to do this for India differently because we are different, etc., etc." It's all great, but you want to build a culture that's more inclusive rather than saying we are standing out and stuff like that. So I think there are a lot of things that HR can, and to me, it's one of those functions that can drive the strategic nature of this engagement if they play their cards in the right way.
Got it. So I'm just taking a pause here and looking at some of the questions that our audience has thrown at us. One of the questions that has come in is how do you define end-to-end solution testing large testing labs? That's one question that Atul Joshi has asked. And then I think a related question that he's asked is what is L2 and L3 support in India for large products? What is L2 and L3 support? Maybe he's
Oh
expecting.
yeah, I can take. Yeah, I can explain that. I'll explain this more with a telecommunications related concept. When you look at end-to-end testing, what you're basically saying is um, the component or that piece of code that I wrote, how does it work in an entire 3G solution? Um, you're talking of a lot of products that are amalgamated and integrated together in a 3G solution. And what the R&D team in Bangalore probably does is just a minuscule portion of that. So there's a lot coming from some of the other teams that are there. So testing as a concept by itself starts with unit level testing where the developer does something, and then the components together get tested. We call it as integration testing. And then gets tested at the product level, the whole product together getting tested. Then we call it as product level testing. And then it gets on to solution level testing where there are different products that are integrated together. So in a 3G kind of an environment, you need to have a radio network controller. You need to have the OMCs that are capable of setting up the switches, and then you need to have the node B by itself that is also working, and then you need to have the radio setup, and all the radio work typically happens in China and comes from there. So all this put together, and when you're validating a network and you want to be firing stress testing where more than 1 lakh or 10 lakh users your software needs to be tested at that level, then the labs and the environment for that will require a site of something like 100 by 100, and the kind of machinery and network setups that you need to have inside that. So those are large scale testing that typically happens there. What was the second part of the question?
Second part of the question was, I think the user wants definition of L2 and L3 kind of support. What is
Oh yeah,
L2 and L3 support?
yeah. So when this whole solution is now taken into the field and it is installed into the field, the users of the systems typically have a lot of queries with regard to how to use the system, or some connectors not working, some integration not working, or some product related defects that come in. So the L2, L3 teams actually uh, should know how the whole solution actually works when queries come in, and then they should be able to pinpoint and say this integration error or this error is coming because of product number one or product number two or product number three in the solution, and then they should be able to pass it on to that team and say, this is a product defect, this is not a integration or a setup defect, so please resolve this and give. So a large scale time is spent actually by L2 and L3 teams in deciphering which product is actually causing this issue.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, L1 support is typically the call center kind of support. L2 and
Yep.
L3 are about once the call center receives something, about kind of doing a triage and sending
Yeah.
the issues to the right teams, right?
Yeah.
So there,
And
that's where
and
they
if
identify.
L2 and L3 can't do it, then it basically means that the L4, which is at the R&D level, needs to get in and resolve it.
Exactly. Okay, so we have 5 to 7 more minutes for this session, so I will continue with some other questions that I had in mind, and this is around the kind of KPIs that typically should be looked at when we are trying to measure the capability centers, right? So what KPIs are relevant for capability centers? Often we notice that typically people look at the span of control. As a leader, I should have 200 people reporting to me or 300 people reporting to me. That's where I can call myself a leader, right? That's typical general services mindset. But then what kind of KPIs make sense for a product organization or a capability center?
So I think,
Um,
sorry, Gopal, go ahead.
yeah, there are two things that I have seen. In some companies, there is a portal where the engineers are often asked to write down what they think are future features that we can incorporate into the product. And um, a lot of engineers actually take up the challenge in recommending features for the product. and there is a competition that kind of this goes across the country. And most times I have seen in India actually winning it, where the number of features that we recommend and get selected by the product management to put into the product actually wins. Point number one. Point number two, uh, we extend that feature filing to also include some innovative ideas and patents around the product, which has also kind of won them accolades. It gets them money, it gets filed, it's patented, and it is selected. It is goes through a vetting process and then gets announced for money, and that's when engineers get more encouraged and they start to work deeper on that.
To summarize what you said, Gopal, it's about whether the innovation factor, whether it is incremental innovation in form of new features being identified and provided by the Indian teams or the capability center teams, and also about intellectual property rights, any intellectual
Absolutely.
property rights being created. Okay.
Yeah.
Ganesh
Yeah.
and Deb, anything to add?
Yeah, so my view is we should not be doing something which cannot be measured, right? That's what saying is there. So everything can be as a KPI, right? But whether now we are looking at GIC to help in increasing the revenue also, not only as a cost center. So definitely few of the metrics you should look at there. We are helping them increasing their revenue growth. In terms of your skill, we are talking about bringing capability and skill. So you should look at our skill metrics there as a part of your KPI. So you need to look at whatever you are doing, and something can be measured and should be measured, should be part of your KPIs.
Great.
So
Ganesh?
I think, yeah, sure, Rajshekar. I think I to me uh, it's a very moot question, because if you look at it, most GICs that have been around for, let's say, a decade or more, right? Actually operating two to three. They're actually dealing with 2 to 3 operating models: the IT operating model, the digital operating model, and the emerging AI operating model, right? Um, and I see a lot of these discussions around, I need KPIs and I want to, be aligned to the mothership KPIs, etc., etc. I think those are all great, but I think, you know, when we look at how technology itself has changed the way organizations are or have started to operate, there's so much around the operating, innovation and KPIs around that, right? A classic, KPIs, that were measured those days were mean time between failures. Today we are talking about mean time to recover, right? How do you build resilient systems? How do you build systems that are engineered for chaos? How do you build systems? And I'm using the word system and products interchangeably here, right? How do you build experiences that are so seamless, where people think the technology behind this is ubiquitous? I think there is so much to do. To me, the very nature of the way tech, technology, and especially software, has changed the operating model of every company, right? Means that the GICs are very well positioned to drive many of these changes. In fact, I have now become part of conversations where I'm saying that the real organizational OKRs being driven by the operating KPIs rather than the other way around. So I think there's a clear demarcation for me to kind of start there. And I think it's, again, it's cliched, but it goes to how you want structure and be as part of the model.
Perfect. So just one last question, probably to all of you. With COVID and with everybody working from home, and then GICs trying to kind of prove themselves, do you think COVID has resulted in any change in the KPIs that we should be looking at, or anything else that we should be looking at traditionally that we don't?
So I think I'll go in first. Uh, I think the disruption for the GICs started actually even before COVID, in my opinion. COVID just accelerated this, right? And while I can go into the details, but I love history, so I'll give you an example from history. A few hundred years ago, many people came to India for handlooms. Yeah, and we know where the textile industry is today. So the computing / the tech product industry is at that kind of crossroads. In my opinion, COVID has just accelerated the journey. So if we are not aware of those and don't learn our lessons from history, I think we just can look at ourselves and say we missed an opportunity. So COVID has been a great accelerator, but I think the change started much before COVID.
Got it. Dave and
Just
Gopal, any
one.
views?
Yeah, I think I remember reading a WhatsApp forward that came to me during this COVID times where it said, if you have not learned one extra skill during the school off period that we had, then I think they said it, you have really wasted, the time. So I think the same way this applies to scalability at organization levels too. If you have really not utilized COVID as a leveler and taken value added steps into your organization, using COVID as a reason, then I think organizations uh, tend to lose in the global space.
Yeah, just to conclude, right, to add to this, I think we are calling this as a new normal, or whatever terms we are being used after COVID. It is all about your priorities, the urgency, and what the impact you are bringing on the table. So I think this is the time we should look at what you have to do it right now, or not going forward, right? Something that's the urgency we need to create. We can see those kind of urgency in all the GIC. We are helping GIC to build their capability in terms of hiring a set of new technology skill they needed. But I think almost all the GICs are looking at, because they have gone through around 8 to 9 months of COVID time, but now they have been accelerated there, as both Gopal and Ganesh talk about, right? This is the time to act, and almost all started acting now.
Just one last point. I know this time the issue. So there are a set of industries, I think, in Bangalore or probably India, that said my kind of R&D work will not permit me to do work from home. I really need to visit, the lab, and the lab cannot be bought home. I think a lot of these organizations have to ask themselves now, how did they reinvent and accelerate themselves to say to work lab from home? That
Absolutely.
itself is a measure saying how we have changed ourselves.
Yeah,
Perfect.
good point.
Perfect. So, as we almost are out of time, let me just conclude. So, we have spoken about capabilities, we have spoken about leadership, we've spoken about mindset, the role of HR, and some KPIs that GIC should look at. While this topic is really vast, and 50 minutes is a very short time to discuss this topic, but we do hope that we have given some insights on these various topics to our participants today. We hope that we have made them a little bit more curious enough so that they could actually do some of their own reading and research, or probably reach out to any of the panelists or myself with their questions, and we will try to answer them and address them as best we can, right? So before I end, I would really like to thank our panelists for taking their time out on a Sunday to share some really wonderful insights. Thank you very much, Ganesh, Dev, and Gopal, and also this wonderful audience that has patiently listened in. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Raj, for the wonderful facilitation, and thanks to all the panelists, Deba, Gopal, and Ganesh. And thank you all the participants for the wonderful questions and participation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.